discovering the perils of having a cat who desperately wants to get up on the computer. So I jumped out of this. Okay, let's revisit this. So, costs of trade. Effectively, what is going to have to happen? Again, transportation, I can put transportation up there, right? It's not zero, it's not completely irrelevant, but infrastructure and logistics management has improved so much over the last 200 years that that is an almost vanishingly small portion of the cost of trade. However, something that is very costly, and one of the reasons why most of you would not go to Iraq to buy your ties or your suits, is most of you didn't even know that this was the case. You didn't even know that this was possible. You didn't know that you could find people to trade with. So basically, again, transportation, it's there. But one of the major costs of trading is finding people to trade with. Of course, many of us don't think a lot about this because we think about the internet that has reduced the cost of finding people to trade with. I want to revisit this and talk about this in a moment. Basically, some companies have specialized not in increasing the gains from trade, but in locating and identifying and innovating ways to reduce the costs of trade. Okay, so you have to find somebody to trade with. Once you've found somebody to trade with, by the way, do you think it's going to become more or less costly as people are further away from us and more different from us to find them? Arguably, the more different people are from us, the harder it's going to be to find them, and the further away they are. Once we have found them, however, then we're going to have to negotiate the exchange. So when I was in Iraq, I would go in, I didn't know a lot, I couldn't speak much Kurdish and much Arabic, but with some hand signs and some hand signals and holding out money and etc., we were in a lot of play acting. We were able to negotiate the exchange. Once you've negotiated the exchange, oh, by the way, as people become more different from you and further away from you, it's going to be harder to negotiate exchanges as well. Once you've found somebody and negotiated the exchange, the next thing you're going to have to do is to enforce the exchange. You're going to have to make sure that they follow through on their end of the deal and that you follow through on your end of the deal. Obviously, if we can find people to trade with and negotiate the exchange, but we weren't able to accurately or reliably enforce the exchange, people aren't going to trade with each other. It's good. Now, all three of these are going to take time and energy. Enforcement is oftentimes something we take for granted. As we can talk about in a moment, enforcement actually is pretty tricky. But again, all three of these, as people become further away in time, space, and culture from us, the costlier it will become. These costs are going to go up. So the benefits of trade are higher with people who are far away and different from us, and the costs of trade are also oftentimes higher the further away people are and the more different from us they are. So this doesn't mean that we are going to trade with everybody. In many cases, it may not make sense to trade with people. We would want to trade again as long as the benefit of extending trade one unit of distance further is greater than or equal to, but not less than, the cost of doing so. So that explains the limits of trade. Now, something to note is, while we may not trade with everybody, we would like to be able to trade with everybody. We would like to be able to trade with people on different planets, in different galaxies. Now, currently we aren't able to, but if we were able to, we almost certainly would be better off because the gains to be had from specialization and trade are higher. Now, that doesn't mean we would. It might well be that the cost of transport, as well as these costs here, by the way, these costs here are going to be what I refer to as transaction costs. The cost of finding, negotiating, and enforcing an exchange. And for much of the 20th century, economists assumed that these were zero. We modeled things as though transaction costs didn't exist, which of course raised the question of why everybody didn't buy their ties in Iraq, and that was something that was rediscovered discovered by economists and reintroduced to the field was that these aren't zero. These are actually really important. Okay? So we now have the benefits of trade and the costs of trade, and this is, in my view, another part of our analytic toolkit. We can think about companies that have done well or poorly, but my contention would be that pretty much all companies that have succeeded in your lifetime and in my lifetime and before our lifetime have done so either by increasing the gains to be had from trade or decreasing the costs to be had from trade. Take a break, and I'll come back and at least talk about some case studies that might fit in this arena.